GoForThe2.com in with the Week 5 college predictions. What can you say? What an amazing weekend of college football in week number 4. Upsets across the board. Started at the 12 o'clock window with Notre Dame. 6.5 point dogs get the outright win in dominating fashion. They poured on in the second half, 41-13 on a neutral field in Soldier Field. Blowout the Wisconsin Badgers. Notre Dame now a 2.5 point underdog against Cincinnati this weekend in South Bend. The 3:30 window saw Arkansas as a 4.5 point dog step up and knock off 7th ranked Texas A&M. Dynamic effort by KJ Jefferson, 212 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns. He did it also with his legs. This is a team in Arkansas 4-0, trending and really hitting their stride middle of the season right now. They are 18.5 point underdogs already on the road this coming Saturday against top-ranked Georgia. We'll see and break down that game later in the week, so keep an eye out for that. Then the upset in Raleigh. What can you say? Just a dynamic performance by Devin Leary and the NC State Wolfpack. They snapped an 8-game losing streak to Clemson. Just a dynamic performance. Leary hits his receiver in terms of the end zone in OT. They step up, force a 4th down. DJU can't convert. This is a Clemson offense that only rushed for 101 yards in that ball game. They have major concerns on the offensive line, can't run the football consistently, being put in consistent long 3rd down situations, making them predictable. And defenses are getting a read on DJU in that offense right now. We'll see if it can change this coming Saturday against unbeaten Boston College. Clemson already a 14.5 point favorite, opened up in the sports books. It's already up to 16 in most spots, so we'll see how that game progresses. I mean, what does Clemson really have to play for? This was a team heading into Raleigh, that since 2014 was 58-5 straight up against ACC opponents. More importantly, they were 32-6 straight up heading into that ball game last week on the road or on a neutral field site. They won those 32 games by an average margin of victory of 26.2 points per game. Lose that matchup last week by 6 points. So you never know. Teams can be pushed to the limit, and that's why we watch every single Saturday, because upsets can happen. Let's jump right into the predictions. Going to be very SEC heavy. I got a lot of picks. I'll try to go through as many as possible in terms of the breakdown. Like I said, you could follow the College Football Full Circle radio show, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. Every day, Sirius Channel 204, Sports Grid Radio, sportsgrid.com. Check it out Monday through Friday. And then College Football Today for your pregame kick, 9 to 12 p.m. Eastern, sportsgrid.com, Sirius Channel 204. So check it out. We go through all the top 25 battles, almost as many games as we can get. We give you best bets. We give you under-the-radar picks. We do a great job. So complete coverage, and then we have you covered from an in-game perspective, 12 to 2 as well. So check it out. All right, let's jump right into it. I'm going to turn my attention to Tuscaloosa and Alabama. Matt Corral, Heisman Trophy frontrunner, and Ole Miss come into town. Keep in mind this was a line that in the middle of the year, Alabama, middle of June, July, and on FanDuel and many sports books, they had Alabama instilled as a 20.5 point favorite. Alabama gets pushed to the limit by Florida, laying 14.5 points in the Swamp. They get pushed to the limit. They win that ball game 31-29. They follow that up with a gutty effort against Southern Miss last week. Did not get the cover at home in Tuscaloosa. Now here comes Matt Corral. He's basically a Heisman Trophy frontrunner. All eyes are on Tuscaloosa. Can he step up and lead the Ole Miss Rebels to the 14.5 point outright win over the Alabama Crimson Tide? That is the spread right now, instilled in many books, 14.5 across the board. Check it out, maybe 15, but 14.5, a solid number for the Alabama Crimson Tide. This game last year, 63-48 in favor of Alabama. They did not cover the 23.5 point closing number last year. This is an offense in Ole Miss that put up over 500 yards on that defense last year. Matt Corral broke out, but the problem was the Ole Miss defense gave up a ton of yards to Alabama, over 600 in that ball game. Mac Jones had a huge day. Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, early on, they blew them out in the early part of the season. So what can we expect right here in this matchup? A couple of numbers that you really need to key on in terms of the series perspective. Alabama has won 5 straight against the Ole Miss Rebels, dating back the last 5 meetings since 2015. They've won those games by an average margin of victory of 33.2 points per game. Since 2016, Alabama against SEC opponents straight up 44-3 heading into this ball game right now. So it's not going to be easy. And more importantly, since 2017, straight up Alabama at home in Bryant-Denny 27-1. The only loss coming to Joe Burrow a couple of years ago, 46-41. So how is this game going to play out? You have two solid quarterbacks, Bryce Young completing 71% of his passes, 15 touchdowns, 1 interception. This is an offense that's passing for over 300 yards per game, converting 52% on third down conversions, which is a major statistic. But I think it comes down to the physicality of the offense and defensive lines of Alabama. We understood that Ole Miss moved the football last year, but now we have a read on the Lane Kiffin offense, extra year of preparation. I'm sure Nick Saban was breaking down that offensive scheme all off season in preparation for this ball game. He's already called out Matt Corral and said he's the best player they've seen in recent years. That could be a recipe for disaster for the Ole Miss Rebels. Ole Miss's defenses look fantastic early on. They're only giving up 132 rushing yards per game, played very well against Tulane, played very well against Louisville. What is going to be the MO of Alabama in this matchup? They're just going to get into a shootout with Matt Corral, or are they going to look to establish the line of scrimmage, keep Matt Corral on the sidelines? I think that could be the recipe. Right now, Alabama averaging around 158 rushing yards per game, the heavy offensive line. I want to see if Ole Miss is that good in run support. Let's wear on them throughout the game. I think that's the recipe here. I think this is a different animal in terms of the mindset of Alabama. They're not going to take Ole Miss lightly. They were pushed to the limit a couple of weeks ago against Florida. Florida ran at will on them. I think Alabama runs at will on the Ole Miss defense. I think it's early and often. It might be close for a quarter, but in the end, I do feel that Alabama does get about a 21-24 point win over Matt Corral in this ball game. Still not sold on the physicality of Ole Miss. I know statistically they're better, but I need to see it before I believe it. Alabama dominates and covers this ball game at home in Tuscaloosa. They move to 5-0 on the season. Another ball game taking place in Baton Rouge. Dynamic effort by Max Johnson and the crew last week, 280 yards. Well, I was on LSU. They made it scary, though. They laid 1.5 in that ball game, jumped out to a 28-10 lead. Derek Stingley did not play in that ball game. Secondary stepped up, forced Will Rogers in that offense to methodically work down the field. And Max Johnson hit some big plays. Kayshon Boutte, nice catch and run, about a 65-yard touchdown. He hit his tight end again in the third quarter. They broke that game open after half. They held on from a defensive perspective, played a lot of prevent in that ball game. Now they play Auburn. This is an Auburn team that dominated them with Bo Nix last year, 48-11. They started fast. They were up 28-0 before you could even blink as a 3.5 point underdog. The secondary was abused in that matchup. It was possibly Bo Nix's most consistent game last year in 2020. Now we have a quarterback controversy. Bo Nix was taken out in the fourth quarter. TJ Finley, the former LSU starter, came in, led the comeback against Georgia State. What does Brian Harsin do? Both teams, I think, are going to look to run the football early. You have an offense in Auburn right now averaging 257 on the ground, around 227 through the air. Both defenses very solid in run support. LSU giving up 2.9 yards per carry. You have the Auburn defense only giving up 88 rushing yards per game. I think this comes down to the physicality of the defense right now. Which defense do you buy into more? Which quarterback do you buy into more? Still going to lean to LSU here with Max Johnson. I picked them to win the division in terms of the SEC West. I know, call it crazy. They've looked inconsistent. They haven't run the football consistently, only around 80 rushing yards per game, around 2.7 yards per carry. But Max Johnson looks more comfortable in the pocket each and every week. Not sure about the status of Derek Stingley. I don't think it matters. Playing at home in Death Valley with a revenge type of situation. LSU, has won 7 of the last 10 games in the series. Revenge spot under the lights in Death Valley. I do feel that LSU pulls out a 7-10 point win over Auburn. It might be close for a quarter. In the second half, though, they make adjustments. LSU, the speed of LSU on the perimeter with Kayshon Boutte and those wide receivers challenge Auburn over the top, just the way Sean Clifford did in that ball game. That's the difference. LSU gets a gutty home win over the Auburn Tigers. Another battle taking place, Stillwater. Oklahoma State taking on Baylor. Both teams undefeated. You look at this matchup last year, Oklahoma State did win 42-3. Very gutty effort at home by Oklahoma State. Don't look now, but Oklahoma State really is the chameleon of the Big 12 right now. 2 weeks ago, they ran at will on Boise State. Jalen Warren and that offense pounded the rock for 218 yards. They trailed 20-7. They made adjustments, averaged 6.7 yards per carry, held Hank Bachmeier and that offense in check in the second half. I know the fumble, we can talk about it, but they still handcuffed the Boise State offense in that ball game. You look at last week, they held Kansas State and that offense to 2 of 12 on third down conversions, but it wasn't the running game. It was Spencer Sanders and the passing attack. 344 through the air, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. I'm really buying into Oklahoma State as potentially having the best defense in the Big 12. Can they stay focused? In years past, they've lost games like this. This line opened up at 4. It's down to 3.5, but I still think I have the better defense playing at home in Oklahoma State. They're holding opposing offenses right now to 32% on third down conversions. More importantly, you look at the front 7, 4 games, 13 sacks. They can get after the passer. On the flip side, I look at Baylor right now. They did not run the football consistently. Right now, entering this ballgame, they're averaging 273 on the ground. They were averaging 326 against Iowa State, only pounded the rock for about 128 yards, 130 yards against the Iowa State front 7. That wasn't a dominant effort. They actually got outgained by Iowa State by about almost 200 yards in that ballgame, but Brock Purdy and the Iowa State offense couldn't convert. Now, Jerry Bohannon goes on the road. He's played well within the scheme, 153 passing yards last week, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. But this is a Baylor defense right now, not getting after the passer. 4 games, 5 total sacks. I don't like that right now, and I think they wear down against a bigger offensive line in terms of the Oklahoma State Cowboys. You watch this game last year, Oklahoma State won this game in the trenches. I know Baylor's 4-0. I know Baylor stepped up as a 6.5-point dog last week, but now they go on the road. To me, this is one of the best teams in the Big 12. They need to show it. I think they step up, laying a short number. I'm buying into Spencer Sanders. I'm buying into Mike Gundy. Call me crazy, but I do feel that Oak State can get to the Big 12 championship to face Oklahoma later in the year as long as they stay focused. I think they get a dominant home win over the Baylor Bears Saturday night. Another battle takes place in the SEC. We got Florida on the road against Kentucky. I mean, this is unbelievable atmosphere, right? Florida, dominant win and cover over Tennessee. They got back-to-back covers now against Alabama and Tennessee. They rushed for over 200 yards on that front 7 of Tennessee. Emory Jones stepped up, 200 passing yards, 2 touchdowns through the air. They made second half adjustments. It was a 17-14 game. Now they go on the road to face 4-0 Kentucky. Interesting ball game because you look at the last 3 games against the Kentucky Wildcats in Lexington. Florida 3-0, but very tight ball games. Average margin of victory only 4.6 points per game. You have a team in Florida that wants to pound the rock. They're rushing well over 300 yards per game, believe it or not, and they're holding opposing offenses to right in the area of about 110 rushing yards per game. On the flip side, we have a Kentucky offense pounding the rock for over 200 with Chris Rodriguez. They're averaging 5.2 yards per carry, and they're only giving up 88 rushing yards per game. Here's the crazy thing when I look at Kentucky in terms of their breakdown. They're converting around 53% on third down conversions. For a running offense, that's fantastic. You sustain drives, you keep the opposing offense on the sideline. So they're going to need to do that. But they're -9 in turnover margin, only 2 forced turnovers all season through 4 games. They're 4-0. That's very untypical to be -9 in turnover margin and still be undefeated on the year. You look at the flip side of Florida, they're -3 in turnover margin. Something has to give in this ball game. You're going to give me the home team plus 8.5 points in a rivalry type of atmosphere with Florida coming off 2 emotional rivalry games of Alabama and Tennessee. Now they go on the road. This could be a dangerous atmosphere. It's a 6 o'clock kick. Florida might win, but I'm going to take the 8.5 points with Will Levis. He's a mobile quarterback as well, like Chris Rodriguez, like Mark Stoops to dial it up. Kentucky covers this number Saturday evening in Lexington in that ballgame. Another SEC battle. We got Missouri as a 3.5-point favorite at home against Tennessee. This is a Missouri defense that's reeling right now. They gave up 276 rushing yards to Pat Garrow and Boston College. Right now, entering this ball game, you have a Missouri defense that's given up 271 rushing yards per game. Yes, 271 rushing yards per game. On the flip side, you have a Tennessee offense that actually ran the football quite well, especially in the second half against Florida. They pounded the rock for 148 on the ground. Quarterback Hendon Hooker looks good. He looks more acclimated in the scheme. 200 passing yards last week, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. This team is starting to understand Josh Heupel's scheme. I understand the wins aren't coming there, but you could see they're building consistency. They're starting to move the football, sustain drives, and they're buying it into the offensive philosophy. That's what Josh Heupel had at UCF, right? Balanced offense, rushing for around 200 yards per game. They would also pass it for about 300 yards per game with Dylan Gabriel. They don't have the progression with Hendon Hooker yet in terms of his understanding of the offensive philosophy just yet, but they're slowly getting there. I like the physicality of Tennessee's offensive line. I think the game plan's simple. Run the football at that front seven of Missouri. Keep Connor Bazelak on the sidelines. They dominated this ball game in Neyland Stadium last year. They're traveling on the road off of a rivalry game. They're catching 3.5 points. I think they win this ball game outright. I don't like Drinkowitz in the spot. I think Josh Heupel happens to be a better head coach. The way Missouri lost that ball game in overtime, I look for Tennessee to step up, make a statement, and come out with a victory in Columbia this coming Saturday. Another key battle is Texas Tech catching 7.5 points against West Virginia. You have West Virginia now with 2 emotional games, a win against Va-Tech, a loss to Oklahoma. Now here comes Texas Tech that got blown out by Texas. Texas Tech has won 2 straight in the series. You look at that ball game on the road last week in Austin. Henry Colombi came in, threw for 324 yards. Tyler Shuck, Colombi. You got to go, in my opinion, I always thought Colombi was the better quarterback in terms of the scheme. He's Matt Wells' guy. Let's see what happens. But catching 7.5 points against a potential emotionally drained West Virginia team, I think Texas Tech could strike the upset here as a road dog in Morgantown. Not sure that the West Virginia defense can step up. There might be an emotional letdown. This is asking a lot for a speed team in Texas Tech, especially when they won 2 straight in the series. They won this ball game 34-27 last year in Lubbock. Colombi did have a big day. Jared Dagey still inconsistent with the interceptions. That needs to stop. That's why I like Texas Tech as a road dog. Back-to-back road dogs. I think they do step up against West Virginia in this ball game. Potentially the best team in the Big Ten. I've called it. I've called Penn State to be a college football playoff contender. They lived up to expectations a couple weeks ago against Auburn. They had an emotional letdown last week, didn't cover the 30.5 point number against Villanova. They now opened up as a 10.5, 11-point favorite over Indiana. Another revenge spot. This is the team that knocked off Penn State at the start of the year. Controversial call. Michael Penix, was he in? Was he out? You can make the argument either way. Either way, Penn State knows that that loss really affected their season from the get-go. They wound up losing 5 straight, including that ball game. Follow that up after Indiana with a devastating loss to Ohio State. They almost mailed it in, but James Franklin did reel in the team. They won 4 straight. You have Sean Clifford that's playing possibly his best football with new offensive coordinator Yurcich at the helm. This is an offense that's throwing for around 303 passing yards per game, only averaging around 110 yards on the ground. But I still think the offense and defensive lines way superior over Indiana in this ballgame. Michael Penix did step up. Looked like he bounced back into form just a little bit. 373 passing yards last week against Western Kentucky. They held on 35-33. But as a whole right now, you have an Indiana offense that's only completing 55% of their passes. If they can't get high completion throws in this ball game against the secondary of Brisker and Joey Porter Jr., this is going to be a difficult matchup for Indiana to win this ball game and, more importantly, cover this number. I go back to the statistic of Penn State straight up since 2016 at home now, 31-5. They've won those games by an average margin of victory of right in the area of 24.5 points per game. I think they step up. they make a statement in this ball game and dominate the Indiana Hoosiers at 7:30. There's the potential for the look ahead against Iowa. I don't think so. I think James Franklin has this team dialed in. They're focused. They understand what they have to do. They have to take one game at a time. They get it done against the Indiana Hoosiers this coming Saturday night. Two free, I always give free picks, you know that, but two extra ACC picks that seem to stand out for me. Let's look at Florida State laying 4.5 right now to Syracuse. Syracuse got an emotional 6.5-point win outright over Liberty and Malik Willis. Primetime game on Friday night. They got blown out last year. Revenge situation for Dino Babers back in the Carrier Dome. Fans there. They stepped up. It was 21 apiece. They win and kicked a field goal with about 1 minute left in regulation, 24-21. You look at the teams that they've beaten so far. They've beaten Liberty. They've beaten Ohio. They've beaten Albany right now for Syracuse. They're 3-1 on the year. They come on the road and they face Florida State that is reeling right now. They're 0-4 right now. Where's their identity? They get blown out by Wake Forest. Everybody does not believe in the Florida State Seminoles, but here's the thing. I'm not sold on Dino Babers. I'm not sold on Syracuse as a whole. This was a team that was 1-10 last year. They've overexceeded expectations. I get that. That was a gutty win against Hugh Freeze. But I still give, believe it or not, the coaching advantage to Mike Norvell over Dino Babers in this type of environment. They're running the football very physical, still averaging Florida State 5 yards per carry, very solid in run support, only giving up around 132 rushing yards per game. I know the front seven of Syracuse is giving up around 88 rushing yards per game, but you have a Northeast team heading to the heat down in Tallahassee. Last time they were there, they got blown out. I'm laying the wood with Florida State. I think they come to play this coming Saturday, get their first win under their belt, lay the 4.5 with Florida State. I think they also have the advantage. Schrager over Mackenzie Milton and Travis over Schrager, or whoever starts for Syracuse. It doesn't matter. They still have major offensive line concerns. I don't know if they can protect their quarterback going up against a solid front seven. That's still solid ACC and SEC talent on that Florida State defensive front. They find a way to get it done and cover that 4.5-point number. Last matchup, two of my sleeper teams. I picked them if you bought the preview this year. Two of my surprise teams in the ACC, Louisville and Wake Forest. Wake Forest off to a 4-0 start. Their win total at the start of the year was 7. I said potentially when they play North Carolina at the end of the year in November, they could be 8-0. Well, they're right there right now. The dominant win over Florida State, the dominant win over Virginia right now. Now here comes Malik Cunningham and the Louisville Cardinals. Louisville's won 2 straight in the series. They dominated this ball game last year in Kentucky. They won this ball game by 20 plus. It really is an interesting breakdown because I think the better quarterback in this matchup slightly still Malik Cunningham over Sam Hartman. I think the more continuity in terms of consistency might be Wake Forest, but I don't know if they have the athletic talent to keep up with the speed on the perimeter of Louisville in this ballgame. This might be close for a quarter, but I still give the advantage. Back-to-back road games for Louisville. They're catching 6.5 points in this ballgame. Not a real home advantage in Winston-Salem. I'm going to take the points with the Louisville Cardinals. I think they strike the upset. I think Scott Satterfield has this team dialed in. That was a gutty road win. They could have quit after they got up to a big lead. They held on. They knocked off Florida State. This team is playing with confidence. Give me Louisville plus the 6.5 points over Wake Forest in this ball game. If you want all the picks for the top 25 games, sportsgrid.com, Sirius Channel 204, Monday through Friday, 12 to 2, pro football and college football full circle on the radio side. And then if you want the college football TV side, 9 to 12 Saturday morning, 9 to 12 Eastern, sportsgrid.com, Sirius Channel 204. Have a great week, everyone. Thanks for the follow and support. I'll see you on Saturday. Enjoy the week.